Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to season 3, episode 23 of the Peace Podcast. Just let me feel, whatever that looks like. And if you listen to episode 21 of the Peace Podcast in this season 3, you will have heard me talk about how it is really difficult to allow yourself to feel emotions when you grew up in an era with parents who told you to rub off your skinned up knee and get up and keep it moving because you had other things that you needed to be focusing on, or they told you it's okay, you're fine, you're tough, you're uh, able to get past this, and they didn't really allow you to have the emotion. They just moved you on to the solution. Most of the time that happens because as parents, we want people, and namely our children, to be in a state that makes it easier for us to deal with them, parent them, and move them on. And when we are that way with them, when we tell them to stuff their emotions and move past it, what we're really saying is, I'm only allowing space for the happy version of you. I'm only allowing space for the version of you that is experiencing emotions that I'm okay with you experiencing because I'm comfortable with navigating you through these emotions. And oftentimes we do that same thing to ourselves. So if there were emotions that we were as a child not allowed to feel, and oftentimes you'll hear people talk about this mostly as it pertains to men. So men weren't allowed to be hurt or sad or any of those things because be a man, suck it up, those type of things. But it does happen with women too, because women are told to smile, you look prettier that way. So it's be happy, don't be sad. If you're upset about something and you voice your opinion, then you're aggressive, etc. And so there is societal messaging that comes to both genders, and it starts very early on in the home, sometimes even in school, that says you can't have an emotion that is going to make the outside world, your external world, uncomfortable when dealing with you. And a lot of times in your family system, that may have looked like stifling the emotion or sending you to a space to deal with that emotion on your own. And if it looked like sending you to a space to deal with that emotion on your own, you probably learned how to stifle that emotion very easily when you were navigating and dealing with people. And so have you ever been in a space where you're talking to a friend or maybe a colleague, and it's the aftermath of this thing that had happened to you, and you were like, well, this was what was going on then, and they're like, whoa, I would have never known. You can't tell at all. Or let's say you show up at church and your family is looking 100% well put together, and you tell one of your friends about your morning and they're like, oh my gosh, I never would have guessed that you guys are, fighting, or that you had battle in your car this morning. And maybe your response back is, well, I just hide it well, or I'm really good at pretending, right? And so if that is you, then you probably got really good at hiding it and pretending when you were a kid, because those type of feelings and emotions weren't safe to share. So you learned that you had to be able to freeze or fawn in your environment. So you had to be able to freeze, meaning um, give give the situation what it needed and not deal with the emotion that you were feeling. So maybe kind of like pause it and put it in the background. And fawn meaning that you didn't allow yourself to feel the emotion because you knew that it was going to have a negative or maybe a not so appealing impact on the people around you. So you learned how to put what they needed from you above the emotion that you were feeling. And people probably have said to you in your adulthood, stop doing that. But it's not as easily done as it is to say to do it. So whenever people are like, just stop doing that, what they're telling you to do is to rewire a system that you literally created in childhood to keep you safe. What happens as an adult when you continue those behaviors is that they actually start to make you ill. So when you are pretending like something isn't bothering you, when you are stuffing emotions that are actually big for you, they have nowhere to go. They rest in your body. And even if there's no solution to that thing, you still have the space, time, opportunity, and all things that, worthiness, etc., to be able to share that emotion. And also, if you're around people who are safe, you know just as well as they know that feelings are fleeting. So you may have a feeling that's really big about this thing today, and then tomorrow it might not seem that big to you. But you should be allowed to at least express the frustration that you might feel in that moment right now. Because in expressing the frustration about the thing and how you feel in that moment right now, you are able to, one, allow that emotion out of your body. Two, become more self aware. So you're able to understand why that emotion became so big for you, why it became so frustrating for you so quickly. And a lot of times you're able to more successfully attach those emotions to the things that have happened in your past, as opposed to giving them assignments for the present when they don't actually have them. So when we think about stuffing emotions and how that leads to disease and health issues, if you look at most of the autoimmune diseases, most of those diseases are your body attacking itself. And I'm not a nurse, a doctor, or any of the things healthcare related, but what I do know in researching holistic wellness is that a lot of the times the reason that your body is attacking itself is because you have suppressed things for so long that your body is confused at what's you and what isn't you. And so you'll develop, you know, um, skin conditions, you'll develop, your hair starts to fall out or thin. You may have stomach or gastrointestinal issues. And a lot of those conditions can be linked to an overabundance of stress. And an overabundance of stress is quite typically a product of an overabundance of not sharing the emotions that you're feeling when you're overwhelmed or when you're frustrated or when you're having an emotion that isn't deemed one of the good emotions. And so you keep it in your body and you keep it to yourself and you're not doing anything to get rid of it. Now, there are ways for you to get rid of it without having to keep it suppressed in your body, or even having to have a conflict or an argument, because a lot of us will avoid that conflict at all costs. So we don't want to share that emotion because we know it's going to cause conflict. And we'll talk about those things that you can do later to get rid of them. But for right now, I want you to understand that there are several medical studies linked to a lot of the conditions that we see in adults now, and the way that they handle stress and deal with their own emotions. A lot of what you're seeing on your social media feed may be about our heightened levels of cortisol in our body and how that leads to weight gain and some other um, capabilities that you aren't able to produce in your body anymore because of certain stressors that you're experiencing that you're not getting rid of. In fact, I went to the doctor probably a year after that toxic relationship that I've repeated about to you guys over and over again. And when I got my blood work back, one of the things that they noticed is that I had fatty liver. And so they were like, are you a heavy drinker? And I am not at all. And then they were like, okay, so this is linked to obesity. Well, I'm also not obese. In fact, I work out every day and I eat a pretty healthy diet. And so there was no actual cause for this to be happening in my body. And so when I did the research and I really looked at all of the medical studies that I could find, what I found was that if you are in heightened levels of stress for an extended duration of time, that it can actually cause fatty liver, and that it can actually be a symptom of chronic stress in the body. And because I was in that relationship for 7-ish years, that chronic stress lasted for most of my 30s, and that's the way that my body responded to it. So it's not to say that you don't have a genuine medical concern, but I would really suggest that you interrogate the reality of your situation right now and say, yes, I have this medical condition, but have I also had extended periods of stress over the course of years and maybe a long duration of time that have led to these symptoms in my body? Even my people that I know who have gone to do like holistic panels, they will have, these levels of the adrenal numbers that they look at that are like sky high and off the charts, and they're like, well, I don't really feel stressed. Well, you don't feel stressed because your body is so used to operating in that state that doesn't feel abnormal to you. But when we don't get our emotions out of our body, when we hold on to them, when we shove them down, when we don't talk to people about them, they fester in there. And a lot of the back pain that we experience, a lot of the hip pain that we experience, even joint pain that we experience, comes from where we store our emotions. So if you look that up and you look up the holistic approach to this, it sounds super hippy dippy, but when you look at it and you look at the spaces that we store those negative emotions, you may find that your hip pain and your back pain is a product of your inability to get those negative emotions out of your body, and that is where they're resting, and it's manifesting as pain in your body. So what are some things that we need to really focus on if we're one of these people who has a really hard time sharing our emotions, has a really hard time seeing ourselves in that human space? Well, one of them is you have to allow your emotions to be. Because if you don't allow your emotions to be and welcome them to the party, you will not be able to heal and grow. It's just a fact, because you are not accepting what really exists. I did this meditation one time and it was super interesting, because a lot of times when you do meditation, the very first couple of times that you get into the practice, it's really difficult to turn off the thoughts that are like zooming in and out of your brain. But the meditation that I did was for people just like that, who had a hard time turning off their thoughts. And one of the suggestions that the guided meditation host was giving was that instead of trying to refuse entry to that emotion, if you just say, welcome to the party, then it comes in and it goes out and it doesn't come back. It wants to keep knocking back on brain's door because you won't allow it to have a space. But if you give it a space and then let it go, then it freely can leave the space without feeling like it wasn't heard. And our brains do that. It wants the thought process to be heard, and so it pushes for that to happen. And so if you are trying to grow beyond this and you want to actually heal, you can't just say, oh, that wasn't a big deal. You have to say, you know what? Maybe experiencing that in my childhood was a big deal. And maybe it did lead to these other things. And I'm not saying anything negative about the person who did it to me, but I'm allowing for me to have the reality that I have based on what I experienced, and I'm going to bring it up to the surface so that I can heal. So a lot of times when you're in an abusive relationship, it's really hard to title it that. Like, actually putting that label on it is really difficult, because one, you don't want to admit that the person that you have so much love for and have loved for all of these years is actually abusive. So to say that they are abusive or they are your abuser is really difficult to do, because you still care for that person and you still see good things in that person. But also to go a step further and say that you were in an abusive relationship is really difficult. especially if it was an emotionally abusive relationship, because sometimes it's hard to accept the reality that that's still abuse. And until we do that, we can't heal from the things that we're experiencing, because it's not until you actually are able to accept what has happened to you that you are able to do the work and allow the change that needs to happen, the different mindset, the different thought process that needs to happen in order for you to move into the next phase of healing. And so the first thing that you really have to do is sit with each of these pieces of emotion. Right now, I feel really frustrated, and that frustration is coming from this thing. And the reason that this particular thing causes frustration for me is because of this, and I can connect it to this. And that is a very long and strenuous process for each emotion. But I promise you that once you allow that to happen, for the emotions that continue to rise to the surface and you keep pushing them back down like a bouncy ball in the pool, and they keep popping back up because they want to be heard, the more you're able to give name to them and allow space for them, the less that they will need to pop back up to the surface like that, because they're actually being heard and seen for what they are, and you're validating their existence. Now, when you process your emotions, there are several ways that you can do that. It doesn't have to be conflicting, and it doesn't have to be a conversation with the person that you're feeling conflicted about. You can process those emotions internally. You can say, okay, this is what I feel, this is why I feel that thing, and I'm going to allow myself to feel whatever it is. You can also process your emotions by journaling. So a lot of times when you don't want to actually have a conversation with another person and you need to get it out of you, putting that onto paper is a way to, instead of internally letting it fester and move back and forth, you can get it onto paper and you can actually process the information on paper, which will get it out of your body and make you feel a little bit more seen and heard. Also, if you do want to have those conversations with other people, I encourage you to use sentence stems. Sentence stems are so helpful when you're having those conversations, because you can stick to the script that you've created to help you to have those conversations. So it looks like, I feel, and then in this space, you're going to insert an actual feeling. You're not going to say, I feel like you do blah, 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 because that is just placing blame on another person. You are actually going to name your emotion and accept that that's the emotion that you have. So let's say, for instance, it's your birthday and your significant other didn't plan anything and didn't do anything for you. You can say, I feel unseen because you didn't make a celebration for me for my birthday. And in the future, I would like to feel like I am celebrated by the people who I allow into my intimate spaces. So you're saying, this is the way I feel, this is why I feel that way, and this is what I would love to see happen in the future. You're not placing blame on anyone, you're not negating the emotion, you're giving it space to exist, but then you're also saying, and here's what I would love to have happen later on so that I don't feel this way. What that does is it allows the other person to see your emotion. It allows for the other person to hear why that emotion exists for you. And then it allows for the other person to see that you just want this slight little bitty change that's really not that big of a deal. And in the future, it should be something easy for them to do. Now, obviously, that's a one time a year example, but it could be something as simple as, letting out the dog in the morning, or leaving your car without gas in it. You can say something like, when you leave my car without gas in it, knowing that I have to go to work in the morning, it makes me feel unvalued. Because when you use all the gas and you don't think about where I need to go, I feel like you don't care that I have to go to work the next day. In the future, I would love for you to put the gas back at the same point it was when you got in the car, so that I can get to work and I don't feel unvalued by you. So it's using these sentence stems to be able to have the conversations. When you get nervous or when you feel overwhelmed, you can stick right back to the sentence stem that helps you to reframe it in a different way, but use that same verbiage to do it. I'm not going to say that it works all the time, because you have people who are very chaotic, heightened emotion, dysregulated emotion, and incapable of having those type of valuable conversations. But 9 times out of 10, with a human who actually knows how to deal with their emotions, that sentence stem will help you and will work. The other thing you can do is utilize creative outlets to get your emotions out. So maybe you could write songs, maybe you could paint, draw pictures, create videos, create content. All of these things are beautiful ways. You may not ever even post the stuff, but they are still beautiful ways for you to be able to say, it's okay to have this emotion. You do have this emotion, and to be able to get it out of your body, because it resting in your body will quite literally make you sick. And the last thing that this is probably, if you heard nothing else, this is probably the most important thing for you to hear. Processing your emotions will lead you to emotional intelligence, because the more you interrogate those emotions, the more you will understand those emotions. It also will lead to self-awareness, because the more you interrogate why you have those emotions, the more you will be able to understand your unique story. So something that I use very often with myself is, but why? So I'm frustrated about this thing, but why? Well, it reminds me of this thing. Okay, but why does it frustrate you? Because it reminds you of that thing. And so you but why yourself until you get down to the very root of that thing. So it looks kind of like this. When I hear yelling in my house, it scares me. But why? Well, when I've heard yelling in other relationships, that person was belligerent and abusive. Okay, but why does it scare you? Okay, so was it just that person who was belligerent and, abusive? Well, no, because when I was a kid, when I heard yelling in my household, I knew that I was going to get spanked or be in trouble. Okay, so I'm going to keep asking why until I get to the root of that thing. Then, if I want to have that conversation later, I can use my sentence stem and say, I feel afraid right now because you're doing a lot of yelling, and it may not feel like yelling to you, but your volume is very high right now. And in the future, I would love for us to have a conversation where we can speak civilly, where our volumes don't have to get that high. The reason that puts fear in me is because when I experienced that as a child, it always meant that I was going to get in trouble. And I really don't want to feel like that dynamic is happening between the two of us. So if your emotions are dysregulated, I invite you to go take a break and let me know when you're able to come back. But I would love to have this conversation when our emotions aren't as heightened and our voices aren't as loud. So you're explaining why you feel the way you feel. And again, disclaimer, please understand these tactics and tools do not work with people who are abusive. These tactics and tools only work with people who are willing to do the same amount of work as you, and you don't want to fight, but you find yourself fighting each other because you're handling really big emotions that are attached to a lot of other things. But asking yourself the why continuously helps you to actually understand the emotions that you're feeling, but also understand why you feel them the way that you do, because your unique experience has led you to this space. So if you're in a space where you just want to be able to get your emotions out of your body, I encourage you to give yourself a time every day where you process your emotions. And maybe it's only 5 minutes, maybe it's only 10 minutes, maybe it cuts into your Netflix watching before you go to bed at night, whatever it is. But give yourself a time, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, where you're able to process, even if it's the surface level emotions for today, until you get to a space where you're able to dig deeper into those underlying emotions. And do that every single day. If processing them in your brain is not enough for you and you feel like there's a better way to get them out, then buy yourself a journal. You can even use loose leaf paper and write down the emotion that you're feeling and why you're feeling that emotion. Start to uncover what it's attached to and why it keeps coming up for you. Because once you get it out of your emotional space, in your body and put it on paper, you'll start to uncover that it doesn't show up as much in such a large way because it's able to be seen and acknowledged for showing up at all. And then once you're able to do that, I would encourage you to interrogate the emotions that come up for you the most and ask what those emotions are attached to. Ask if, because you've had those emotions so much in your past, that you're allowing people into your space or even choosing people to come into your space who perpetuate that same narrative because that's the narrative that you're used to being in. Or ask yourself if you're hyper vigilant about activities or conversations that produce that emotion because it's in your body at its heightened ability to be. Like there's no more space for that emotion to have any more space to be in your body, and you're not getting rid of it, but you see it so much and you're so hyper aware of it that it keeps showing up for you. That's probably the emotion that you need to deal with first, and you need to prioritize talking about it and getting it out of your body so that you can have more room for it to be, so that you can have more room for it to heal. Because we can't heal our emotional spaces and wounds if we don't allow the opportunity for them to be in the room with us and for us to talk about why they exist in the first place. If this video resonated with you or this podcast resonated with you, please like and subscribe to my pages. Share this with a friend. Remember that knowledge gained and kept to yourself is selfish, but knowledge gained and shared with the world could just be the catalyst that they need to break free from the bondage that they're currently experiencing. And as we all know, experiencing bondage keeps us stuck, and my goal and my hope for all of us is to be unstuck and to be living freely out in the world, just navigating the world in a way that allows us to be fully in our purpose. So thank you again for listening, and I'll see you again next time.